on, so you can control your own headphone volume, however you like.
Hello.
There's.
Oh, that's great.
That's great.
I like that I can't hear myself.
Yeah. All right. Cool.
Yeah,
Cool.
That's way more comfortable. Your voice sounds nicer than my voice, anyways.
Yeah, but you're the one with interesting things to say. That's why I have guests.
I have to live up to that, though.
Yeah. Yeah, after all that interesting talk from before, I think we're spent.
I have nothing to say.
Yeah, after that, it's...
Yeah, like the only thing I can say now is my shoe was comfortable this morning when I put it on.
Yeah?
Yeah, it was
just
great.
one?
And then I put on the other one, and it was awesome.
Oh, nice. That's good when they're both good.
Yeah, and then I felt like this is going to be a good day. So I think we should leave it there.
That's it. Shortest episode yet.
How you doing, Mike AM? It's a good day for a podcast. He said, yeah, let's do it. I said, fuck yeah, okay, let's do it. And that's how it happened, and it's happening now.
I don't need to read who you are. I know who you are. You're Bob Shields.
I am.
Hello, Bob Shields. Listeners, this is Bob Shields. He's a music educator, lifelong student of music. Or are you done learning music?
No, I'm just beginning. Man.
Just beginning.
Yeah.
Yes. Did you finish your PhD?
I did.
Are you Dr. Shields now?
Yeah, don't tell anybody.
Don't tell anybody.
I feel like a cheese ball when people say that.
That cracks me up because at my high school there was a Dr. Shields, and he was, I guess, I don't even know what he was doing there. He was like the philosophy teacher, but most of the time he just wandered the halls. He was very elderly.
He just needed a job is what he needed.
Yeah, and he'd catch you on the halls and he'd be like, I have a very good philosophical question for you. And you're like, Dr. Shields, I got to get to math. I've been late 3 times this week. And he's like, why? And the out was, you say, why not? He's like, that's a good deflection of a great philosophical question. And then he'd leave you alone.
Yeah. Yeah, you do tend to get more. That's one thing about doing a PhD is you spend 5 years reflecting on a subject that's close to your heart, and you end up being able to, for example, all the things we do as all the knowledge that we accumulate through our experience as musicians over our careers, like you're doing right now. A lot of it we acquire implicitly. We don't think about the knowledge as we acquire it. It just sort of happens, right? Then you're confronted by something that impedes your creativity as an artist, and you want to defend what you do, or you need to defend what you do, and you find it's difficult in those moments to express yourself because your knowledge is mostly implicit. So your argument becomes emotionally based. Mm-hmm. And most of the time, the people that are confronting you as an artist are not other artists. They're supporting you. It's the people in suits that are impeding you, and the last thing they want to hear is an emotional argument because it doesn't appeal to their sensitivities or lack of sensitivities. And so doing a PhD allowed me that, just like you, just like an artist that has implicit knowledge acquired over a career, it allowed me to articulate what I was feeling more explicitly when I was confronted by people that were impeding myself, my colleagues, my students to flourish through a creative life. So that was the value of doing the PhD that I didn't know I was going to get. Again, I just follow this path now and see where that takes me. I don't know.
So that's what you feel like you got.
That's the most important thing I got out of the PhD was, I'm just I've got some explicit knowledge now. So I research why creativity, why a creative life is important to our well-being. Because a lot of people write it off, right? A lot of people don't value that. And finding some facts about it that could support what I was feeling about it was important, because although I'm just beginning, I feel like I'm starting to be able to explicitly explain my position to those people in suits, and when I talk in facts and objectivity, they tend to listen, and they're starting. The people that I've been. Some paths have been opening up because of that ability. And, I stumble over words every sentence now, but at least in there now is the ability to somewhat get that message across in an objective way, rather than my instinctual musician way, which is, fuck you, this is awesome. Why aren't you doing it? Why aren't you supporting us?
Yeah.
Like, that doesn't fly. It flies between you and me and other artists because we get it. But it doesn't fly when I'm in a conference meeting. I'm the weirdo in the conference meeting until I start using language that they can relate to, and it's got to be objective language.
Is that language, does it come back to financial reasons most of the time, or are there other things that the guys in suits, let's call them, respect?
Yeah, it's like when you're talking to people that aren't artists, or not just musicians, but artists and teachers of art and in the arts community in general. They do like objective conversations. They don't want to talk emotionally, and those objective values and needs are tied to the marketplace, right? And tied to economics. So if you show them that you understand economics, you don't have to agree with their position, but if you know as much or more than they do about their own domain, they tend to listen to you. Right? I don't know why, but they tend to listen to you, and they tend to give you a space to speak. Which almost makes me angry. It does make me angry, because I'm almost thinking, well, why weren't you listening for the 20 years before? Because I knew this information implicitly. Just because I'm speaking your language doesn't. Business-minded people don't want to meet you halfway. You have to meet them on their turf, as we were just discussing earlier with the bars, right? Mm-hmm. They live in this economic world, and it's fundamentalist world, right? And for us to be anywhere near comprehensible to them, we have to speak their language, because they have no clue what we're talking about when we speak our language. Because it's not in their DNA to relate to that, literally. Well, figuratively.
Did you start to gain a better understanding of that side of things while kind of playing this devil's advocate game with your own beliefs with the over the course of your PhD studies?
Yeah, I never. So part of the PhD thing is, as you know, everybody knows this, is it has to be whatever argument you pose has to be objectively defended, right? And that defense is peer reviewed. There's a 5-person committee that you have to present to in order to receive a PhD. So it's gotta be legit. You can't just say this is the way it is, God damn it, because I feel like this is the way it is. Yeah. It's got to be this is the way it is, God damn it, because the facts speak to this, right? The facts support it, and you have to present those facts, and it's got to pass 5 people's comprehension of it. Then after that, you're doing some conferences. Probably as a PhD grad, you're going to do some conferences, and you might get published, right? So if you're going to get published, you want to get published in a peer-reviewed article, magazine, or journal, right? And because that shows that your research is credible, right? And
that has the potential to branch off into other researchers being like, this guy's onto something. And
I think, more than the PhD itself, if you're published in a journal that's peer-reviewed, blind peer reviewed, that's even more important because it's not your school that you graduated that gave you the PhD. It's somebody that doesn't. It's a panel that doesn't know you from Adam. A journal, an international journal maybe, and then you get published there, and you now you're more credible. Your argument is credible, and because it's not opinions anymore. It's not your opinion. It's facts based now, right? So your argument, you can speak in a way that says you can say, well, for instance, if we teach our students to be economically minded, that does X and Y to their cognitive abilities. And this is not, and if I say that, it's not an opinion because I have the facts to show you that that's the way it is, right? The multiple research studies that I can draw on to support what I'm saying. So that's why the business community goes, oh, okay, so we'll listen to this guy. We're not going to agree with him, but at least we'll give him space to speak, and then we'll diss him after he's gone. And we'll listen to him when we make our decisions because, God damn it, it's got to be the economic way.
Right. And the focus of your studies, if I understand correctly, were, and you said a moment ago, the kind of effect of creativity on a person's well-being. I guess mental primarily well-being, or did you find...
Yeah, that was the whole thing. I didn't even know when I started. I didn't even know I was going to do that. I thought I was just going to do some music thing, like a normal person would, right? So
yeah, how did you end up off in that direction?
Well, I did my master's in composition, did my BA in performance, and I was a college student before that at Mohawk, right? So I just wanted to. By the time I got to the PhD, I was like, okay, let's do something different. Let's not just do. I don't want to do a PhD on Louis Armstrong,
right.
Because that's just, how many of that can we listen to here again, right? I want to do something that I can learn from, really learn from in a whole different aspect of my life, that I haven't even tapped into. And at the same time I started that, it was coming to a head at the places I was working at. I've worked at York University too as a teacher, right? So York and Mohawk, McMaster, and I know of a lot of friends who teach at Humbert and U of T, right? So I was really in touch with the faculty community in the GTA, and in touch with a lot of the students, and we were feeling as faculty members the crunch. We weren't the academic freedoms we were afforded, say 10 years prior, were now nowhere to be seen. We were being told top down how we were going to teach, what we were going to teach, right?
By people who
don't do music, right? Deans, okay. Associate deans mostly, right? But I didn't know that. I just thought, why am I not allowed to do this? And it and there was and students, and I could see that students weren't learning as much as a result of their teachers not being handcuffed, right? And the discussions in the class were less free. It was let's prepare our students for the workforce. Period. Right? It wasn't with that said, why don't we teach our students about the workforce? You couldn't talk about that because that was blasphemous, right? You couldn't get students. You can't have a student thinking, right? You have to have them complacent and compliant. This was all stuff that we were feeling, but we couldn't express, right? And it was diminishing the well-being of my students. And I didn't know at the time that student mental health issues were increasing drastically over this time because I wasn't doing any research on it. I was just noticing my students were freaking out a lot more, and my colleagues were freaking out because they were losing their jobs. I remember I was talking about Kieran getting his hours slashed, which affected his pay
and made it not worth coming in.
Yeah, he couldn't afford to be a teacher there. Isn't that awful? One of the best
It's
bass
more
players
insidious
in the country.
than being. Yeah.
You know, it's too bad, buddy. We're not going to give you those 2 extra hours, even though you're one of the best musicians in the country, because we need to save that money, and it's worth sacrificing your expertise being shared with our students so we can save a nickel. Yeah, it got so bad that one of the deans said, well, we can replace this whole faculty. I won't say which school. We can replace this whole faculty with local guys that will work for a fraction of the money you guys are making, and the students will just be as happy. And that was literally told to us, right? And it was like, that was an eye opener. And this was all occurring as I began my PhD. And in the first year of the PhD, you're basically just learning how to research, and then you try to focus in on what your focus of research is going to be. And so I thought, maybe I'll try to figure out what's going on here. Maybe I'll just, why are my students all messed up? Why is my faculty messed up? Why are we being told we can't teach the way we know they need to learn? And that became the inspiration for the PhD. I didn't know exactly how I was going to end up. I just started looking into things. So I thought, well, I gotta figure out what I'm defending here. So I guess it's the creative process, right? Creative learning is what I'm defending, standing up for, and so I have to actually research what that is. Right? I thought I knew what it was as a musician, for so long, but then I learned a lot more about it doing the research, and then I thought, okay, so in order to be creative, for my students to be creative, what provisions and freedoms do they need? Right? So then I thought, okay, so if I can think about that, well, how can I find those indicators and conditions? Then I thought, well, well-being. Maybe I can link creativity to well-being, and by saying we need creativity does this and this and this to our well-being, then we can defend some indicators and conditions for creativity. So basically, I'm looking at where creativity and well-being intersect. And at those points of intersection, what I'm doing is creating indicators of creative well-being and the conditions needed to cultivate those indicators of well-being. And you mentioned earlier, mostly cognitive well-being. But according to various, when you research well-being, that's a whole thing in itself. But there's international bodies of well-being. World Health Organization is one of them. And if you look into the research that's around that body, you'll find that well-being is not just cognitive, but it's cognitive, affective, and physical. So if you think of any self, what a self is, self has a mind, a body, and a heart. So there's the affective self, the cognitive self, and the somatic self, physiological self. And that's not according to the World Health Organization and other well-being experts. There's also your environmental well-being, because you can't be separated from your environment, right? So your environment and you should be considered one. So then there's your physical environment has to be considered in terms of creative well-being. Your social environment and your temporal environment. This is the one most people don't know about, but temporal means your experience of time, not time itself, but how you experience time in your daily life, time pressures, time restraints. So temporal well-being. So there's your self, your environment, and then there's what mediates the two. So your motivation and your self-regulation. So well-being is about the self, the environment, and the systems that mediate between the two. So to create indicators of creative well-being, you have to look at those dimensions and find indicators in each one where well-being and creativity intersect. Say affective well-being, your emotional well-being, and say, okay, for emotional well-being to be cultivated through creative learning, we need to provide this and this. So, and you do that for each dimension. And you form a list of indicators and conditions. And then you use those as a tool for advocacy for your students and colleagues in work and learning in life, you know. So it's a big thing. It was a lot of work. It's ongoing. I'm writing a book about it.
Nice.
and I've been continually researching the whole time. I've been graduated, I think, 2.5 years now. So I've just been diving into the research still. I feel like I'm just beginning still. Like music, right? Like, that's the other thing about PhD is silly, right? It's like, you get a master, you get a BA in education, then you get your master's, whatever that is, and then you get a PhD and you're a doctor of something, philosophy. So you start philosophizing, and then you're supposed to be done. And unless you do a post, level, you could do post-grad. But we know as artists, as a guitar player, I've never been there. I never will get there. I just keep learning, right? We put these labels in academia on people, and I think it's sort of not only is it harmful because it makes the public not value the people without the labels. It gives the people with the labels leeway to be not not have veracity in what they're doing, right? So, which is, you get a lot of people with PhDs that are idiots, right? and a lot of people will buy their idiocy because it comes with the label PhD. Whereas some guy that's played guitar for 30 years or drums for 30 years has twice the knowledge as that person with the PhD, but won't get listened to or respected as equals. Mm-hmm. You know, and it's a shame. You know? So that's part of the beauty of some stupid guitar player like me eventually getting a PhD, is that now I can speak for all the other stupid guitar players like me, and people will listen to us.
We appreciate it. Is there any one, I don't know, chunk of your research or piece of evidence for creative well-being that has been particularly effective arguing to those people who are like, oh, we don't need this stuff, we can cut music out of schools, we can...
I can give you an indicator in every dimension of well-being that's mind-blowing, right? Like, but the thing about the main argument would be against that, even though I'm so tempted to just say, you know what it does to our cognition, boom, is that we lose the main message that all these things are interconnected and intrinsically reciprocal, right? So your cognitive well-being is intrinsically reciprocated in your affective well-being, in your somatic well-being, in your environmental well-being, in your mediating well-being. So you can't parse them apart, right? So and we know that implicitly. You know, we can't think straight if our hearts aren't feeling good.
Yeah.
Our hearts don't feel good when our bodies feel like crap. And we can sit there and meditate all day long and try to heal our minds, but when we walk out our door and have to live in a free market society, we're fucked. Meditation is not going to help. That a me-only meditation approach, right? Mindfulness if you study mindfulness, it's about a lot more than the self. It's about creating a society of peace and justice, advocating for that. Mindful activism, right? So you can't separate these things. You have to have a holistic approach to creativity and creative well-being and well-being in society. So I think that we tend to love reductionism, right? But the arts in particular tell us that reductionism is not a human phenomena. We're subjective. Each one of us is unique as two snowflakes, right? So I think that think of all the harm that's been done to subjective humans in the name of reductionism. And the thing about creative well-being is if we take a more holistic approach, yeah, sure, it's a little more complicated to grapple with, but we deserve that. Our well-being deserves that, so, yeah, I like, in my improvisation class that I'm teaching right now, or my summer classes that I teach, that's the approach I take. I tend to do a discussion every week on one aspect, like you're saying, cognitive well-being or effective well-being, and then each week we link it to the next well-being, and we see how you can't parse them apart. That in order to say, for instance, in order to have indicators of cognitive well-being and creativity and in life are cognitive fluidity, flexibility, and efficiency. Those are indicators that we can cultivate through creativity, and in the free market existence, it's shown that cognition narrows and it gets rigid. Right? So that's a condition that impairs cognitive well-being, which a creative learning environment, like say music, cultivates. So they're in opposition to each other according to well-being needs. So we can advocate for a change there. But the thing that you can say too is, okay, if we have a rigid, narrow cognition, what does that do to creativity? You can't see how things are connected to each other because you're only goal-focused. Mm-hmm. And when you're goal-focused and you're extrinsically motivated, then when you reach that goal, it's like a junkie. You forget you don't need to make a connection because you've got your fix. But through creative learning, if you're process-focused and you reach a goal, because it's intrinsically motivated, it's been proven that your cognitive scope is wider and broader, and you're more apt to be able to make connections to things in your periphery, right? So there's multiple research studies that support the need for creative learning that cultivates cognitive flexibility, efficiency, and fluidity, because the marketplace impedes that type of cognition, and in fact it narrows cognition and diminishes the ability for fluidity, flexibility, and efficiency, right? So, and then you think, what effect does that type of cognition have on your ability to self-regulate your emotions, right? So then you're talking about effective well-being, right, and self-regulation of well-being and motivational well-being. So these things are, see how intertwined all this stuff is? It's messy.
Yeah.
But it's wonderfully messy, and it should be left wonderfully messy, and we shouldn't reduce it to one thing. But the marketplace would love us to be able to reduce it.
Yeah, it's tough. And even with the sticky thing about being creative, it's not of much use in the free market sense to the creative person. It's more something that can be capitalized upon by one of those goal-oriented, narrow-minded fellows that just like, oh, you created that thing? Let's do this with it.
Yeah.
And is there any solution insight to that type of thing where the people who are in touch with this creative thing that is so good for you on every other level, just keep getting used?
Right.
For that.
Creativity is harnessed for economic needs, basically, and in that process, it gets reified, which is essential elements that are useful to the person creating get stripped away, right? So there's as a musician, as a painter, as a dancer, as an author, what you're consumed with most of the time is the creative process-focused creativity. Right, you go down a rabbit hole for a while, you check out this, you come back, you take a left turn. Creativity in that way is heuristic and it's self-ordering. Right, it finishes when it's ready. You can't force it. That's just creativity. However, in the free market, creativity is a goal processed thing. It's algorithmic, right? And it's done for exchange value, not use value, right? As soon as you take the use value, elements of the use value out of the creative process, you're really taking out that process-focused creativity out of the equation. Because if you're a businessman, if you allow that infinite time, unpredictable time for the creative process, that's money lost, right? So you can't do that. That's because economics is a conservative landscape. It's not a liberal landscape. And I think that, so we're talking about process focus, product focus, use value, exchange value versus exchange value. And as soon as we give up the process focused approach, the use value approach, that's when we lose a great deal of the intrinsic values to well-being and the conditions and provisions needed for that, right? So, yeah. How do you get that point across to people? You do what people like myself are doing, and you do what people like you are doing. You continue to create, and commercialism be damned. And I continue to do that too, but I also have this stupid PhD thing which allows me to write about it, and people might maybe listen. So to a different audience, so we speak the same language. I'm translating that language so that guys in suits might listen. I don't even know if I own a suit.
I have a jacket.
Yeah, I think
it's really nice, but it is from Value Village.
Yeah, I have a couple of jackets. Every time I pull it out of the closet, I got to wipe the dust off the shoulders.
Yeah. If I had a couple, I could see myself being like blazer guy, where I like wear blazers, but I never go to the thrift store and get myself like a couple, and I can't just have the one. That would be crazy.
So when you're doing creativity, like me being the researcher and you're the subject in the lab, if I'm like asking you, like when you're creating a song or whatever it might be, a part of a song, a lyric, a music, or whatever it is, when you're in the creative process, is there any point where you're distracted by what you should be producing according to an audience of whoever that audience is? And have you ever thought about the effect of that on your creative process and what might be lost when you're distracted by those things?
At this point in my life, I've like really embraced music lessons being my main source of income.
Oh, okay.
And that has allotted me the ability to really truly not give a fuck about what how something I do, something I create might be perceived. So I would love it if people love the thing, but that's because I love it, right? And when I show it to someone, it's like, look at this, like when you show your parents the picture you drew, you hope they put it on the fridge, right?
Right.
And
I think you being. Do you work for a store or yourself or both or?
A couple of studios and privately. So
So you have a lot
my eggs in
of
a few
freedom
baskets.
probably of what you can teach, right? You're allowed to teach the way you think you should teach, right? You have academic freedom. Right?
Yeah, quite a bit, I'd say. My employers trust me, and all the students like what they're getting out of it.
Exactly.
So.
When you have academic freedom, I find that you can inspire students a lot more, right? So that's the difference between our situations, right? So like I'm teaching in a post-secondary institutional world, and I just mentioned the constraints are increasing, right? So that academic freedom is diminishing. So it's harder and harder to inspire students under those conditions and to feel inspired. like I'm making good money. I make good money teaching, like per hour. It's crap, the situation, because it's a contract situation for your whole career.
Right, you want just more stability than that.
Yeah, we all love stability if we've been doing it for so long. But
you don't want to be constantly proving your value
every
day
4
in, day
months.
out. Yeah,
we wait for a new contract. I've been doing it for 20 years.
Yeah,
I
just
don't know
waiting for some hungry young go-getter who's talented enough to take your place, but not self-confident enough to ask for nearly as much money as you want.
So I don't. Yeah, like I guess I want to say a few things is to that and how your situation is. I envy your situation in a good way. I don't begrudge it at all.
You're not gunning for my job at the Fun School of Music.
I envy the ability for you to go into a teaching situation and teach the way you know it should be done in your heart. You know, that freedom is so important. It's so important for the student. You know, and you can make a living at it. You know, that's how I started teaching. Even in post-secondary, I felt that freedom. Like I could go in and speak my mind, you know, and because that's what they want you to do. That's what they hired you to do, because you're the expert, right?
Yeah.
So, but over the years, that's diminished, as I've explained. But so now it's like, but the problem is, and this is the big problem with, this is probably the biggest problem with my colleagues, like. Most of the heavy jazz guys that you know, or my colleagues, are struggling. You know, they're working in post-secondary, and you think they got a good life. It's the worst, because those 4-month contracts, and we all got in about. Some of us 15 years ago, some of us 20 years ago. There's one guy that's been in post-secondary for 30 years as contract workers, right? So you get in, your pay is, you know, multiple times what it would be as a musician working in a private studio, right? So you can afford to start to buy that house. You can afford to send your kid to university. You know, or kids plural, right? You can afford to help your parent go to a nice retirement place instead of a shitty one, right? So you start to use that money, and that money becomes dependent on, right? You build a life based on what you're making economically. So you trap yourself, right? And a lot of my colleagues have trapped themselves. It's not their fault. It's because when they got hired, they were promised, as anybody would be, that if you do your job, you do it well, you'll move up the food chain, right? And you'll have more security, job security. But that has actually gone the opposite way. Nobody gets hired full time. Job security is at all-time low. Precarious employment is skyrocketed, right? The statistics are terrifying, and that doesn't bode well for our students either. So now you've got all these guys that have been teaching in post-secondary. They're trapped in post-secondary that hate it because they have no academic freedom. They have they don't get to use their skills in the classroom, and they're not getting rewarded for their expertise and their loyalty to students and the institutions. And they're depressed, they're anxious. The mental health faculty has gone up through the roof, just like for students. And the economic situation is the reason behind it all. The economic neoliberalism, basically, right? And I think that. Like a lot of I've been talking a lot to one of my good friends who we went to school together, the whole thing, and now we're teaching together for years. And he's got a family, and he's constantly battling whether he should just give it up and quit, but he can't. Now his kid just started college, and he's paying for that, and he's paying for his house. And if he stops, he's gonna lose the house. His kid won't be affording college, and he's got it's a huge life change, right? And people go, well, get over it. I've lived in poverty for, and I've lived like that, and I'm not out of it by any means. But what I can say is that that's their fear. That's the biggest fear right now among faculty members, is giving up, is letting their families down by quitting, by giving up, because the teaching situation in a private studio would be way better, but they couldn't afford the things that their family has become dependent on.
Yeah.
Even though we're musicians, we don't care about money. Now we're trapped by it. It's horrible. It's like they, in a way, we could care less.
Yeah.
If I get, like I say, I don't own a suit. I don't spend money. I don't. Come look at my house. It's pretty modest. Everything in it's modest. Still got furniture from people in my family that I picked up when I was a student. I haven't replaced it. Because I don't care. I just want to play my guitar.
Yeah.
That's all I want to do. In the end, my daughter says, on my gravestone, I'll just say, Bob Shields, he just wanted to play his guitar.
Just wanted to play his guitar.
And that's basically all my buddies, too. In teachers who are teachers and players, they just want to teach and play. And they don't. And the money is, the economics, the economic reality has strangled a lot of people and caused a lot of mental health issues.
I came up with this word, I don't know, maybe someone said it before, but busybodyism. And I feel like that's this plague that's really gripping people in this time where you have to be constantly proving how effective you are and how hard you're working, so no one else thinks that you're not doing this and that, being everything that you can be. And we should all strive to be the best versions of ourselves.
Right.
But a lot of the times, people are working hard at nothing.
Right.
And
you hit the nail on the head, right? So part of what is motivating us to do things in this society, right, is economic fundamentalism. And neoliberalism in particular, neoliberal society demands certain behaviors. One of those is self-reliance, self-centeredness, being competitive, and self-improvement, right? And all that takes a lot of work. Right? It's exhausting, and it's endless, because economic society is 24/7, right? So self-improvement isn't self-growth. It's improving yourself so you're adaptable and flexible for ever-changing economic environment, because you're going to be in a gig economy for the rest of your life. So you got to constantly keep up. You got to take that extra course, learn that extra software, have a social media presence, and maintain it. You've got to be self-reliant, because now you're your own boss. So you can't rely on anybody for a pension or anything like that. You have to. There's no union for you, right? So you self-reliance. That's a big one. Being competitive, right? So you have to compete in the economic workforce to win a spot for yourself, and disregard the losers, right? Even though we don't say that,
Yeah.
So that's being busy. But what is that kind of busyness taking away from again? Being busy for utilitarianism rather than being busy for full scope capacity growth. What did you call it?
busybodyism.
Busybodyism. I like that.
Thank you.
I can quote you in my book that I'm writing. Yeah. So what do you think Does that do you have that sense like we're busy, but we're busy because we've got to self-censor ourselves, police ourselves, commodify our relationships.
Well, for one, everyone's working for Instagram. It's like this genius thing. It's like a TV station that figured out how to get all of the actors to work for free.
Yeah.
And it's like if you're in any sort of thing where you're your own boss, you're maintaining that social media all the time. And there are clever ways to kind of like passively do it. And just for me, like the podcast is there's literally just like a link to the website, and just so if anyone like their main source of surfing the internet is Instagram, then they can type in the Michael AM radio show, and then there's just like a link to all the episodes. And I've just recently, like as in this week, started posting like highlight clips, and we'll see how long that lasts, because I'm not.
I think that what you're having a podcast that allows people to speak critically and thoughtfully on a social media platform that's designed just for attention seeking is in itself pretty cool, because you're using that platform to change the perception of what can be done on social media, right? Like why not, instead of just being me orientated and seeking attention and getting people to click on your posts, why not put a post up there with some critical thinking in it and see it and be damned if you get a lot of response or a small response. The response you get will be from the people that you want, right?
Nailed it.
Right. So, and what I did,
I don't know if you listened to
what I've done.
sorry.
What I've done on Instagram is, it's a recent phenomenon in my life because I hate social media.
Yeah.
But this cover band that I play with, this prog band, wanted to do all the social media, and I thought, oh no, here we go. So I said, okay, well, I'll set it up, but I'm not maintaining it. Like,
yeah.
Okay, so my drummer Dave, he sort of swallows the puke in his mouth and maintains it most of the time. Right, whereas I just I don't. And I thought, okay, and then my students are always like, a lot of times people are trying to get in touch with me, and I thought, okay, so a couple of social media things allows me to interact with my students in a meaningful way, even though you don't see that on the social media stuff.
Yeah,
they'll see it, they'll message me, and something happens, right? So it's behind the surface of it that the better stuff happens. But so on my own Instagram site, I was like, what am I going to put on this? I can do the typical, here's me playing this scale or this tune. I'm thinking, but that's just it. Like, I don't want to turn it into an attention-seeking thing. Like, I just don't like that. So I thought, maybe I'll just post art, and that's all I've done. I just post art or nature, and just to give people maybe a moment of relief
yeah.
from somebody trying to attention seek.
And they say, oh, he's posted in the last 2 months. He is here. If I send him a message, maybe.
Yeah, the last thing I posted was a photo of that Salvador Dali painting at the Beaverbrook Museum in Fredericton. I just thought, well, that's beautiful. Maybe somebody can rest here for a moment.
Oh, yeah, okay. That was, you were talking about it, and I was like, yeah, I saw that recently on your Instagram page.
Yeah.
That's funny. Yeah, I think a lot of these conversations end up coming back to, making the whole social media thing work for you, and, having a healthy relationship with it. I think everyone's kind of, everyone is admitting that it's here to stay. And in a lot of ways, it's a really good thing. You can keep in touch, at least on a surface level, with a lot of people who you do care about, but would not, in the past, go to the lengths of telephoning or writing or whatever. So it's nice to be like, oh, Andre had a kid, you know, like this guy from high school who I haven't talked to. Or
Yeah,
something
like that stuff is fine, you know. I think the problem is that a tool is not a discrete thing within a culture, right? Like, so social media is a tool, like all tools, and it's what's articulated to that social media tool that can cause problems. So social media right now is connected to economics, right? And economic education, economic workforce, economic life. And so people are using it mainly to attention seek, so that they can advance whatever economic initiatives they want to, right? Whether it's an individual one or a large business, right? And that's we're teaching our students that that's what they should be doing, right? We're teaching them to brand themselves, and before they even know who they are, you know, and they never will be who they are, because you never stop growing. It's the notion that we're static beings and we're products is nonsensical. It doesn't hold water to any research, right? We're fluid beings. We're dynamic, right? And we never stop learning, and we never stop becoming. We never sit statically and be. We're just in the process of becoming, and social media is blind to that under an economic hegemony. I can't keep using that word. Sorry. Hegemony.
Hegemony?
Hegemony.
I don't know that one.
Hegemony is like the maintenance of a dominant ideology. So economic fundamentalism. Like, let's live economic orientated life, and the reason we do that is because something out there is telling us to do that, right? Some ideology keeps permeating our lives and maintaining that belief that we're economic citizens, that's how we live, and that's a natural thing, right? So, but it's not. It's subjective, and the reason that's the reality that's a maintained ideology, a top-down maintenance of that ideology. That's what a hegemony is. Yeah.
I like these because I can listen back to that and understand it later.
Yeah.
I hate when this happens because I thought of two things that I wanted to talk about within that little so I don't forget the becoming process with you know, having to brand yourself. I want to come back to that in a second, but there's this actor, comedian who I'm a fan of. He has a podcast that's kind of terrible. It's literally him just like ranting and like plugging his shows, and it's my favorite background noise. And it's sometimes I don't want to listen to NPR. I don't want to learn. I just want, you know, someone saying funny things about what's in the news or whatever, right? So Chris D'Elia, his Twitter handle is Twitter is free. If you want good shit, come to a show and pay for it. And I think that's a good way of using that tool, is like literally some comedians will sort of workshop jokes. Like they'll give like a snippet in like a Twitter thing, and based on the response, they're like, oh, this might be worth turning into a bit. And same with like Instagram, you have like a jam or a riff or something like that. You document what you're doing anyway, right? So, ooh, look at me tying this into the other thing. So instead of, you know, being like, this is who I am, right? You, like you said, you're always becoming. And at that stage of development, when you're like 19, 22 years old, it's like, wait, what are you telling who I... By the time those pictures get developed, I know pictures don't get developed, but right. by the time
it's a matter of
by the time that EP is mixed, you're not gonna be that person. So why invest all of this in telling all these people who you are, instead of just like putting your all into that thing and then into the next thing and then being process driven, right?
I think there's a good lesson would be learned from a lot of young musicians to go along with a jazz band when they go do a recording in the studio, because unlike mostly in a rock situation, a contrast would be you go to a recording session with a jazz group and you could see how casual it is, right? Like you'll notice a difference right away that they're serious when they're playing, totally committed. And as soon as the playing is done and all the other stuff starts, they couldn't care less. And that's the case for about, I'd say, 90% of jazz musicians out there, because they were only concerned about the process. And the product is something, we have to do that. So like you have to sell some CDs or get some streaming happening, But then that's an afterthought. It's like, we got to do a bit of that because people want that. And then a lot of musicians actually despise that part of it, like because they just care about the process. And I think because they understand that that's what the important thing was just the playing and nothing else matters. The creative process is, in another word, ephemeral, right? It's here one moment, gone the next. It's not it's a product that's ephemeral. It's and musicians know that, and so the whole business of let's make a CD or whatever it might be is almost silly to them. Because it's like this thing that happens after the creative process is finished, because that's got nothing to do with the creative process, according to me. The creative process happened when you played, right? It's not what happens after. That's an economic thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's actually distracting from the creative process and growth and becoming.
Let's talk about Frank Zappa a little bit.
Okay. Yeah. Speaking of dental floss.
Yeah. I've got my dental floss in the other room there. That was a nice touch.
And that's part of it, right? Like Frank Zappa, a great musician, but the only moment that mattered was the music moment. And then after, he just despised the whole machine around it, right?
Mm-hmm. And
so the whole notion of taking yourself so seriously too, he wasn't into that, right?
Yeah.
So
although he learned, the language of the guys in the suits and the, how to function within the machine and all
right.
that.
So when he went to Congress and fought that censorship,
yes,
that was like, okay, so here's this musician that they're going to write off, walks into the Senate hall, and he starts talking, and this guy's articulate and he knows some shit, and we'll just write him off because he's making sense, right? And he's a critical thinker. Holy shit. It's the worst thing you can put in front of a bunch of economic-minded people is a critical thinker that scares them to death, right? So, yeah, that's that thing I was talking about earlier, gaining the knowledge to speak to the guys in suits with objective speech that they can fear and relate to, rather than walking in like, Gene Simmons and speaking like that. And even though in their heart of hearts they're saying the same thing, only one of them will be taken seriously.
Yeah. What's his name? Dee Snider kind of knocked it out of the park in the same thing too.
Oh, yeah.
Did you see that? From Twisted Sister?
No.
Yeah, he was very prepared for...
Oh, yeah.
It was something about one of their album covers, and he had to go to court for it, which is insane.
I remember that thing. Years ago, I was doing this tour in Europe, and Dee Snider was at one of our gigs.
What? Did you talk to him?
No.
Oh, man.
Yeah, he was out in the audience. I guess he liked it. But
who were you playing with?
I was playing with this prog rock group called Exception.
Okay.
It was like they I guess I didn't even know who they were. The keyboard player came over because he had family here, and it was like he was looking for a North American band because it's racist, dude. Because we rock better because rock is North American, right?
Right, sure.
So he wants real rock musicians, right? So I joined that band along with a drummer and a bass player from here. And we went over there. We didn't know who the guy was, and we found out, oh, this guy's pretty big, and he has all these gold albums. And
Oh, wow.
and we had no idea because we thought the music was sort of silly, right? It was really freaking hard music, but it was all this classical music put to hard rock, right? So we were doing Bach and all that, like Paganini kind of stuff, that stuff. And so we had to practice our butts off, and and then one of the gigs, I think it was in Switzerland, Bonn, I think it was. Is that the place? Bern. And he was in the audience.
Wow.
Yeah.
Was he wearing all the stuff?
No, but he had long hair.
Nobody had the poofy hair. You can't miss that.
Yeah.
And was there any room for improvisation within that? Or was
Yeah. Rick van der Linden was he was a good musician. Like if you watched him play, technically, and he arranged all that music. Everybody knows. You're a little younger, so you might not know this, but like there was a huge hit when I was a kid. I didn't know it was his.
Oh yeah,
it was like the Beethoven's Fifth, da, 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 and it has the rock groove to it.
That's him?
That's Exception.
What?
Yeah, so that we didn't know that. I didn't even know that once we started playing, right? It was only after the fact that I was noticing people were coming up with albums, getting them to sign albums and all this. And then we were always on the radio over there and doing interviews, and it was like, I guess, this guy is like huge. Like over there. But it's such a different world, right? Like it's more liberal. Music scene over there is North American music scene is very conservative, right? They don't want to take a chance, right? Things are very constrained for pop music, for rock music, even indie music now is getting more and more constrained, right? So, but in Europe, it's a nicer atmosphere to be a musician because you can still be a free jazz musician there. You can be a prog rocker. You can be a metal guy. You can still tour.
They have is it like, I don't know, Sweden had like a contestant on their version of The Voice who just did like death growls. It was like a metal guy.
Yeah.
And I mean, how you would even begin to kind of like compete an R&B soul singer against someone who's screaming.
Right. So like they're way more open to like you being you as an artist, and that's okay, and there's probably room for you to make some sort of a living in performance. Even a band like that tribute band that I'm in, we could go to Europe and tour all the time doing this. Over here it's hard to find a gig. Because
well, you just have to accept $50 in a bar tab. You can have any gig you want.
Yeah, play for free.
Yeah,
but like the bands like this in Europe are touring and doing theaters. You know? Because there's an audience. The audience is more educated.
You think it's that, or is it more population density?
I think it's more educated.
Yeah.
The radio stations over there's more satellite radio over there that are dedicated to different kinds of music than there are here, like in Atlanta. And it's been, I think, because there's so many different cultures living close together, there's all that transmigration of ideas and art, and it's more natural to be accepting of different things than it is here. Like it's almost a monocultural, overarching society, even though we have multiculturalism. In the end, it's shaped by this one societal set of values, right? But in Europe, you've got multiple sets of values that shape the art, right? And because the borders are open, that fluidity of ideas is.
Yeah, I guess you can't really disentangle
decades,
that
right?
from like geography and culture, and all that stuff comes into play.
Yeah, that's why the European art scene for so many hundreds of years was so rich, is all this sharing of ideas, right?
Should I look in the book? I'll look in the book.
Oh, no.
No? All
No,
right.
go ahead. No, I just said, oh no, he's going to ask me something I don't understand.
What is a song, Dr. Shields?
A song.
What is music?
What is music? Yeah, that's a good one. I asked my students that one.
Nice.
Yeah. Do you actually want to talk about that?
Yes.
All right. Well, there's all sorts of ways to think about. I guess when you're talking about what is, you're talking about meaning, right? So the notion that something has meaning to be a phenomena, right? So music being a something with meaning enough to be perceived as music, it precludes that something's going on there. So there's like, I always think of, does the meaning in music happen inside the music? Is it the relationship between the notes that's, sort of self-emergent? This note, like in mathematics, 1 + 2 = 3. Oh, that's meaning, right? Is music dominant to tonic? Oh, that's self-referencing meaning. So the meaning in music doesn't have to have anything external to it. It's the notes, the relationship, the physics and the math of the notes, and that's cool. So music meaning can be self-contained, right? It also can refer to something external to the music, like program music, singing about a lyric attached to a set of music that describes something external to the music, the way I feel. So that's the meaning in music is external to the notes too, right? And then there's more. The meaning in music is a combination of both of those things. So it can be rational based, or it can be emotional based, or it could be both of those things, right? Internal or external. The other part is the meaning in music constructed or receptive, right? So do I construct the meaning of music as a composer and you just receive it, or do you construct the meaning in music when you receive the auditory signal, and that's up to you, right? Or is it a combination of both?
Well, because sometimes you can just hear some sort of weird synchronicity. Like I was in a yoga class once, and there was like a sound bowl,
Oh, yeah.
and it was harmonizing with, like, they were drilling outside, and it was just such a strange, wonderful interval. And I was like, I want to listen to this. As some other people said, they were really stressed out by the sound of it, but I loved it. And that, sometimes, or like, your car blinker can be, like you're saying, that you're receiving something as music. It's not, there was no intent put behind making this
right.
music, but it's music to the listener.
The art is in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah.
Right? Or the ear of the beholder in this case. So is the meaning in music external to the music itself? Meaning, are you constructing it, right? Mm-hmm. Or is no, that's music objectively, even though Mike didn't perceive it. It would have been music even if Mike wasn't there. No, it wouldn't. It would have been dependent on the perceiver, right?
Yeah.
So, and music, and even to get more basic than that, we know the phenomenology of sound. Sound doesn't exist external to our minds, right? There's no actual pitch in nature. It's only sound wave pressure. I mean, air wave pressure that we interpret through our ears as pitch and duration and amplitude. Right, and so the world of music, it only exists between our two ears. There is no sound external to the human, phenomena, right? So, or it could be a bird, or it could be a dog, like mammal, like animals. Music, whatever sound is internal to the being. The sound doesn't exist in an objective world. Right? So it's weird that even sound itself is created, and how, if we perceive that as a dog barking or music, is dependent on our culture, right? The environment that shapes how we perceive sound, right? That's why music to one person is noise to another, right? Like you were explaining in the yoga class, right?
Mm-hmm.
That it was music to you and not to other people. Well, that's because the culture that shaped how you perceive sound was different from theirs, right?
Yeah.
So the guy screaming death metal, Central American death metal, or whatever it might be. What's the band? Mezug? Anyways, you know what I'm trying to say.
Roots?
I don't know. That one.
Not
of
the
those
band,
bands.
but they had that album called Roots. They're
But anyways, what I'm getting at is, my grandmother wouldn't even thought that. She would have thought the guy needed to go to the hospital. There was something wrong, right?
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of my students think that's wonderful music, right? And so is culture. It's sound created uniquely by the human brain, but the experience that sound is music is socially shaped. It's environmental, right? And then there's the autobiography of Mike that comes into play, or Bob. Like, my personal experience in life will modify my environmental shaping. So yeah, I might conceive that as music to me, while most of my jazz colleagues don't, because of my personal experience, right? However, maybe 10 years from now, something I don't perceive as music will become music, because, again, that becoming rather than being, right? I'm fluid, I change over time, and each time I confront, for example, this dolly, I bring to that experience me in the moment now, not me 10 years ago or the last time I saw it. So the way I perceive that is going to be different, right? So that's always a new artwork, right? Depending on, it's totally dependent on the me that never stops changing, right? And bringing what I bring to the experience of viewing that. I don't know. So that. Yeah, we talk about all this stuff in my class with my students, and students are great, because I like when they haven't been exposed to all this kind of conversation, and they start just talking honestly, and they totally surprise themselves and each other when they start talking and learning about this, and just simple things like sound doesn't exist outside human experience. It blows them away, right? Mm-hmm. And just to think about what a gift that is.
Same with like color.
Yeah, and anything our senses, touch. Touch. It touches this touch, color, taste. None of those things exist beyond the human experience. They're not found in the objective world. So our reality is subjective. It's internally formulated. And again, it comes back to that sense of, in an economic world, it doesn't matter. It's about the things external to the mind, right? But we know that that's not where our well-being lies. It lies in those subjective experiences: taste, touch, what we feel, what we hear, what we smell. Those things that form our experiential selves, they get disregarded in today's world. And as an artist, we're so in touch with our senses, right? Like we're all about like just going inside and exploring those areas, and then we try to express them, and there's no one listening, right? Because there's no audience, because it's not supported, because it doesn't have a lot of exchange value in the marketplace. Mm-hmm. You had another thing you were going to ask, I think. Or maybe you asked it and I didn't notice.
I think I'm doing that thing where I want to go off in two separate directions right now. I think there's a term for that, actually.
All right. I was going to mention, like, thinking about that perception thing, it just came to mind. I don't know why, but I'll just add this. Like you were in the yoga thing, and you perceived as one way, and I think one of the most famous version a lot of musicologists talk about is Jimi Hendrix's Star Spangled Banner.
Right.
So, the Star Spangled Banner was originally a German drinking song, right? It's a song people sang in pubs and got smashed to.
Yeah.
And then somebody plagiarized it and it became the American national anthem. And now it's a badge of honor instead of a drinking song. And then Jimi Hendrix played it, and it was an activism song, social rebellion, and all that went with that. Mm-hmm. And now, in retrospect, it gets that social activism becomes a badge of honor to the people that out years after Woodstock. So the meaning of the music is dependent on the culture around it, right?
There was this really. Do you know who Adam Neely is?
I think I've heard that name.
He's a music YouTuber. He's a bassist who went to Berkeley, and he did this video essay on how the Star Spangled Banner is radically different from every other national anthem, in that it has like the largest range from the highest note to the lowest note, mm-hmm. and in the way all sporting events go, kind of everyone sings the anthem, whereas in American sporting events, it's like you focus on one person and, you know, they get judged afterwards on how well they sang this ridiculously difficult song, which is impossible for anyone, even when changing the key, to place entirely in their vocal register. Mm-hmm. I just found that fascinating, and I think about that every time I think about that song now.
Yeah, you think about and the appropriation of the national again. So that's another meaning of the Star Spangled Banner. The sports world appropriated it,
yeah,
so that they could make it seem as though
going to a sporting event is an act of patriotism.
Right?
Yeah,
so it's a marketing ploy, right? So again, the meaning of the song changes for the culture who's listening to it.
Have you ever read Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance?
No. See, and I should. My wife's probably read it 5 times. At my age group of people, and everybody's read that book, right? Mm. It's like The Hobbit,
right? Yeah.
The Lord of the Rings. That's another one. Most people my age have read that and have read stuff about mindfulness, so at the time I didn't read that stuff. I read The Hobbit though.
Oh, nice. Let's talk about that instead.
But the thing that I was going to mention about that is that because I went deep into the research of well-being, and I've been there for years now, I've read the stuff that inspired those authors, a lot of those authors. The actual research that preceded that, or have come after that, there's another famous one in the music community, Effortless Mastery.
Yes,
you know, sort of the musician version of that.
I meant to bring that up as well.
Yeah, so like those types of books, I'm well aware of them, but I feel like the research I've gone into has gone way past. Mm-hmm. What those books do, because I've heard all sorts of. I've heard what's the guy that wrote Effortless Mastery?
Galper?
Yeah.
Was it Hal Galper, or is that a different person?
That's a different person, but
he preaches kind of the same.
He's a music educator performer that does the same. This kind of
same with Victor Wooten's The Music Lesson.
Yeah,
kind of has the same concepts behind it.
And I think all of those things are super valuable, but they're gateways. Right?
Yes,
like that. Like it's like you know, your first jazz album. You think, oh, it's sort of weird, but I like it. Then you get into jazz or first classical album or whatever it might be. I think it's important to have gateways for everybody. But in order, like for me, I was thinking, okay, I'm not going to just sit in the gateway, because then again, it's that implicit, subjective stuff arguing against the guys with suits who need the objective language, and they don't read that shit, right? Which is great, but they won't read it or the messages. So what I'll do is I'll go to the objective stuff that informed the people that wrote the subjective stuff, mm-hmm. and then I'll argue based on that stuff.
Right.
You know, and by way of being an artist, I can look at that and I can see the lessons that effortless mastery dude is talking about already, those subjective things. I totally, my heart of hearts is all about the subjective. That's where I live. That's what I defend. That's what I'm all about in my own performance and career and my educating. But I know that I have to be a little more objective these days in order to get my point across, so to affect any positive change. You know. So again, so go on about that book.
Well, so have you gotten like a rundown of for anyone listening? I'll get to it. The book follows a university professor. He teaches rhetoric, and he starts pulling at the thread of what quality in writing is. And the more he pulls at that, he's like, oh, well, it's subjective, but I have to give the students these tools, to do this. And slowly he goes completely insane. And the book starts off with him after the fact, after he kind of loses his job because of mental health reasons and such, because he realizes he literally doesn't know how to give the students these tools that they need to succeed in the business world and such, right? So the book starts off after that, and it's the story of him getting back in touch with that intrinsic knowing of those things.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Man, that's the predicament of all teachers with a lot of, who are thoughtful, who have a lot of experience, because the more you learn as a teacher, the more you'll be going, what the fuck are we teaching this stuff for? Like, this is all wrong, because, and you go, and in a way you just want to say, I just want to leave the students alone and let them do their thing.
Yeah.
That's what I want to do. And I just want to be there once in a while if they need me to whatever it is, I'll be there, but I don't want to interrupt them. I don't want to get in their way, And the more I teach, the more I believe that. Like, I really believe that. And it's hard. Like what was it yesterday? Yesterday I was teaching a class, and I was like, okay, class, next week is the first test. Here's what you got to have ready for the test. And we were talking about being present in the moment and not being distracted. And when we improvised, that was the class. And I was saying, you see the contradiction here, right? You see the hypocrite that's your teacher, right? Right? And I was like, yeah, I'm trying to deal with it. I'm honest with my class. I said, I hate this. I don't want to do this, but we need to do this, or else I don't have a job, and you're not students here, right? So
yeah. So
this is something. Well, we can talk about that problem. That is a huge problem for us to be able to do all this stuff that book espouses, probably, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that you're talking about, So yeah, teachers go through. I'm sure all teachers are going through that. That are the least bit thoughtful about what they do. Improvisation
in music, in visual art, and every kind of art. What kind of arts are there? Dancing. I always overlook dance because I don't know why I overlook dance.
Well, dance is a performance art. It happens in the moment, and some of it's pre-composed, like ballet and stuff. But you have modern dance. Martha Graham, she was the modern dance founder, and that spirit of modern dance is a lot of it's improvised. So so something happening in real time, changing circumstances, just like music. Things that Rembrandt sketches, happen in the moment. Picasso, most of his process was improvised in the moment. And so all the lessons that the masters, supposedly masters in each of those domains have are can be shared between the domains. So we should be able to look at a Rembrandt sketch and learn how to play music, and vice versa, right?
My fiance is a yoga instructor, and sometimes we'll like jam.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how the music can influence the postures and the postures can influence the music, but it's like two different mediums interacting, and it's almost just this kind of like,
Man.
I don't know, like the creativity is like an extra person in the room almost, and you can get that with all sorts of different things.
Yeah, well, it's because you're present, tuned into the moment, to each other, and to what's happening in the moment, and that's what improvisation is, right? Is being tuned into the moment, noticing things, and responding to those things. And the response is, in the case of an artist, would be to communicate something, right? And the cool thing about something like yoga and music is that the whole yoga teaches us how to respond to the solicitations of our body, right? The messages our body's sending to our brain, and self-reflect on those. And it teaches us through that self-reflection what we need, right? How we need to self-regulate in order to be well. And as a musician playing the guitar, you're responding to the physical solicitations of your instrument and the environment that your instrument is in, and over time you respond adaptively to those solicitations, just like the person doing yoga is. So you share the same. So instead of inference, for example, you rationalize what's going on. What you're doing is you're using your perceptual self, your intuitive selves. You're cultivating that part of your cognition together the same way, even though they may appear different on the surface. So the systems involved in what you're doing and what your fiancé's doing are basically the same. And that, when you have two structures like that that appear different on the surface, but the same thing is going on underneath, it's called isomorphism.
No.
There's a great book called Bach, Gödel, and Escher, the artist, and the book is called The Eternal Golden Braid by Douglas Hofstadter. It was written in 1971. That's another one of those books that, hippies read.
Right,
but it's friggin' awesome.
That touches on the surface of something really fantastic.
Yeah, it's a heavy read, but it's an entertaining read, and it speaks to that, seeing the similarities between things that you wouldn't perceive as similar at first glance, and learning from those similarities and sharing, So yeah.
So we, as musicians and artists, once you start getting really like working on your craft, you start developing your ability to execute these building blocks like scales and arpeggios and all this stuff. When do you feel like you're really improvising and not just kind of running this program that you've imbued yourself with?
Right. So there's a balance between so this is the difference between a craftsman and an artist, right? So, and procedural creativity versus product creativity, process focus versus product again, and thinking about, what does a craftsman do? Like, I'm going to make that vase over there 10 times. So each time I have an idea already, a pre-notion of what that vase is going to be, and I execute it. So I'm problem solving. So I'm making sure I've got everything, all my materials, I make the vase, I'm done, good. In the case of improvisation, what you're doing is you're coming at the process with no preconceived notion of what's going to happen. You don't have that vase at the end that you're going to make. You're going to have to create in real time and embrace your mistakes and go with them. In order to do that and able to communicate intelligibly, however, you have to have some sort of internal knowledge base that's shared with other people, Remember that whole idea of music is culturally shaped, the meaning, right? So your ideas that you're communicating about that process is happening in the moment of improvisation have to be communicated in a language that somebody understands, or else you might as well be Robinson Crusoe on an island, you know. So I think that's so having that knowledge base there, but not getting in the way of the free spirit of creativity that happens in the moment, and you know, so balancing your reason, that implicit knowledge base, with perceiving things in the moment and trusting your intuition. Those three modes have to be balanced, right? A lot of students have trouble with their perceptual knowledge and intuitive knowledge because they're so scared to go there, because I'll just play this scale because I know it works. Mm-hmm. But that's not creating, right? That's just a craftsman doing his craft, right? In order to create, you've got to take those risks, go to those weird places, and trust yourself so that you can find a different way to use that scale that's new to you. That's another misconception about art and being what creativity is. Creativity isn't something that's creative for everybody. Creativity is something that's useful and novel to you in the moment for whatever you're doing. So, for instance, if I know how to play a scale on a chord and I just do that, that's not creative for me. But if you're just learning a scale and you were put in a moment and somebody played a chord and you were thinking of it, and then that scale came out because you were finally practicing it, and then you heard that it worked. You perceived that it worked and you trusted your intuition. You didn't even know you were going to do it. Then all that hard work, all that inference actually came out as novelty now, something creative for you. You know, it wasn't for me, but maybe my use of the scale at where I'm at in my growth is I have to find other things to do with the scale now, not just play it, right? So I have to use the scale on a chord that I didn't even know existed before. Or, I don't know, or anything. Something novel for me is not something novel for you, and they're equally valid. Whereas I'm digressing. Sorry.
It's weird how you can feel that in like a performance too. Like when someone's not really at a high level of expertise, but they're reaching outside of their comfort zone and kind of like nailing it at whatever level that is. A lot of the time that's more, like more enjoyable than seeing like a seasoned pro kind of going through the motions.
Yeah, it is. We have there's another falsehood of economic world and commodification that the next thing is an evolution, right? That evolution is linear, that things get better and better, the novelty gets greater and greater, when in fact, at the moment, this moment is the only moment that matters in life. It's the only one that is, right? So when we think about that and the reality of that, if we look at even the natural model of the universe, the universe isn't evolving linearly. It's just evolving. It's not evolving. That whatever moment is in time has happened now is no greater or lesser than the next moment. Right, so if we think about that and appropriate that to our conception of novelty in our own lives, then we know that kid that just played that triad for the first time in an improvisational setting that will never get better. That doesn't get better once he knows giant steps. It's not less important, and giant steps is not better. And when he learns giant steps and then he tries to do countdown, or he tries to do improvise free like Schoenberg or play guitar like Alan Holdsworth, it's not any better, any more meaningful than the first triad that he played in front of an audience. And that just happened in that moment. Each one of those moments is equal. And I think that gets lost on students when the message is, you got to be this, you got to do this to succeed, you got to be at this level. Then they miss enjoying those moments of self-growth and embracing them and finding them equally valid. In fact, they almost are shamed by them. Right?
How so?
It was just, I played a triad, but it's nothing like what he played.
Right.
So I'm
just comparing themselves all the
yeah,
time.
We're taught to compare, with others, to be critical of ourselves and others and judgmental, rather than to be accepting and open and valuing the here and now.
That kind of comparison can be a good tool for growth, but it's a thief of joy, which is very important to the process itself, right? That joy is one of those things that you feel, that the audience feels, that everyone that you're sharing it with. So what's some method that's healthier for self-improvement or pursuit of? Here we are getting to that motorcycle maintenance. What is quality? But how do you? Let me rephrase it. What is practice for you now?
Yeah, practice is a combination of. I look at it from a bigger picture now than I did, and I never really. Again, creativity comes back to it's self-ordering, it's non-linear, it's heuristic, and those things are important to keep in mind. That it happens when it happens, but patience and determination and persistence are part of the equation, and you don't even know what it's going to be. And you got to embrace all the small steps. And as a musician, you have your knowledge base, melody, harmony, rhythm, and form. You got to keep up on that all the time in order to communicate in the same language as other people. But what I try to do now is really work on cultivating the other two modes, like my perceptual knowledge. So I try to experience more, look at art, look outside of my comfort zone and experience in first person, multisensory, not through Google, because that's not how the brain works, and that's a whole other discussion. And then I try to keep taking those risks, which is my intuitive self. So my practice is more like the bigger thing. So how do I organize learning at being a musician, the knowledge base that I have to internalize, get some continually get experience first person, contextual experience, and take those risks. So and then I have to balance those three areas as a musician, and so again, it comes back to what's the real value of music. Well, if I'm cultivating those perceptual self, inferential self, and intuitive self, what I'm doing is helping myself in my whole life. If I apply that to my whole life and use music as the lab for that, and I get to reflect on how it's going there, and if something worked in my improvisation, my behavior in that moment worked out for me, then I can reflect on that and say, well, I'm not doing that in my work life. What if I apply it there? Would it help there? These are the lessons we don't talk to students about. Again, that comes back to that book and the frustration of that professor, right? Mm-hmm. That's the frustration we feel. We think, there's all this wonderful stuff there, but there's no time in the class for it because I got to get them ready for this test.
Yeah.
And they're going to lose out on the really important stuff, And I've only come across this years later, right? Like, because I'm stupid. It took me years to start even thinking about this stuff in this way. But I want to help my students get there quicker, especially given the economic climate these days, which is far worse than when I was their age.
Mm-hmm. One of the things in that book, one of the sources of his frustrations is that as he as he teaches the kids the rules of proper rhetoric, he says the bad, not bad, but like uncreative, non-present students got a little bit more intelligible, and the ones who had anything special just got worse, way worse.
Yeah, you can really do damage to a student by teaching them. Yeah, that's a fine line. And when I was a young teacher, I had no idea about that. I just thought, I'm going to teach them this because it's good for them. Mm-hmm. You know, and you go in there and you get some people fighting you back, and you get some people that accept it, and you disregard the ones that fight back because, of course, they don't know anything, and you know better because you're the teacher. And then as you mature, you realize that, oh, fuck, I was wrong. You know, I totally was back-asswards about that whole process of what a teacher should be doing, you know. And I really, you know, I let my ego get the best of me. I didn't even know what was happening, right?
You just write a recall letter to all of your students.
Yeah, I feel like for the first 10 years of my teaching, I need to write an apology letter to every student. Yeah, I think I'm probably not alone, but I know for me, like, yeah, I was pretty authoritarianist, you know. I was like, do this or you're not going to do well, you know. Whereas now I'm like, should I tell them anything? Should I get in the way, you know? And now it's all about trying not to get in their way, and not. And there's a problem. The only problem with now is that when you try not to get in their way, then you're telling them that anything they do is okay, and it's not. That's not good either, right? Yeah, because you still want them to have that knowledge base, that perceptual ability, and that trust in their intuition, and you still want to cultivate those three areas. And you know ways to cultivate them. And if they're not doing it, you don't, hey, kitty, you don't want to call them out too much, but you need to let them know. And so it's that, how do I do that without interfering?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are certain things, like if my students are, I guess I'll just like refer to like the traditions in the school, just so you know, there's people who fall into this camp or that who would label this as wrong or whatever. And then I also point to the people who have done exactly what they're doing, who have found great success with it. So for me, I'll serve it with the reminder that, yeah, it is a subjective medium. But also in what I'm doing at my job, this is what you're supposed to be doing that. And if it works for you, then cool. And if it really doesn't, you know, you take stock of what I'm saying and you're still like, nah, that guy's wrong.
I think
the
too,
people
like,
he's talking about are wrong.
That aspect that we struggle with as teachers is the objective knowledge, like the scales in our business would be the scales, the chords, the arpeggios, the forms of music, all those objective things that we're supposed to make them work on, the style.
And there's those things in every visual art, in painting and dancing, and whatever.
Construction.
Yeah, exactly.
In life, you know, and that's so I'll start with that. Now I started to come to the place where we're working on that language. That's that shared vocabulary you need to be to be able to be intelligible, right? Mm-hmm. So we need to develop that. But if I see them not doing that, however, they're doing something that's the equivalent, I'll let it go, right? I'll let them go there as long as they're working hard at it and developing a strong way to communicate that area, right? Yeah. That's a shared vocabulary as well. So I'll say, okay, I'll let you do your thing because you're doing the same thing anyways, but you're doing it, and so that's intrinsically motivated. So I don't want to get in the way of that. If I see them, we've all had students like this, like, okay, I'm not really into that. Okay, we'll see where you go on your own. And they sort of slouch around, and they don't really get anything accomplished, but they're thinking it's really artsy.
Right.
And that's where I have to step in and say, well, yeah, but does anybody else get what you're doing? Oh, my mom does. Well, that's because she loves you. But would anybody that doesn't know you understand what the hell you're trying to say? Well, maybe not. Well, that's the problem, right? That's you don't have a shared knowledge base, so you can't communicate. And as a human, we're social beings, right? Part of our job is to communicate how we feel and what we're thinking. So that's where so that's a conundrum too. Like, where do you step in? And
you're making me think of the Shags. Do you know? Are you familiar with the Shags? The Shags were. Frank Zappa said they were better than the Beatles, and there are three sisters brought up in this like really small town, and it's really funny because they were doing what you were saying, where there's this thing that no one else gets, but their shared knowledge base was with each other. Mm-hmm. Okay. So they basically, like, using a guitar, a bass, and a drum kit, invented their own language of music that doesn't sound like anything. And allegedly, like, the recording engineer who did their one album, like, said they would be like 2.5 minutes into this just like cacophonous, like, what it doesn't sound like. It's insane. I'll play you some after, or maybe I won't do that to you, but they would stop like 2.5 minutes into a thing and be like, we made a mistake, we have to start again. And, like, what's that worth if you do have someone who shares that knowledge base, but it's so isolated into this little pod? That's
okay too. I think if your culture is 2 people, that's fine. If your culture is 10, that's fine. If it's 1,000 or 10,000, that's fine too. I think I don't have a problem with small culture, that shares a vocabulary no one else understands. We think about the atrocities that are done to indigenous cultures because our culture is dominant, right? And for some reason, because we have more people sharing a vocabulary, we get to dictate how to live and how they should live in our shadow. Right. I think, and we do have to step out, like that. Playing music and being an artist gives us a chance to reflect through things like you're describing and project them to the bigger things in life like that. So, of course, when you think about that, you think, well, yeah, they're a culture. What is a culture? 2 people that share the same way of seeing things and values and beliefs, and that's a system. And we need to provide the freedoms and resources for that to be sustainable for them, because that has a lot to do with their well-being. Right? So even though they're, we can't, our culture, again, just like the Star Spangled Banner metaphor, it's all about that. It's important to them. So, yeah, I try to find in my students, if I see there's a culture for it, and they're really developing it, and they're working hard, and they're working towards mastery, whatever that is, which is never finished, obviously, then I'm good. It's when they use it as an excuse not to work hard, or not to learn, or not to self-reflect, or critically think, and be persistent, or have a motivational drive. And I do get excuses like that, and that's a hard place. A student that doesn't find meaning in things is becoming more common. Right? I think, and that's statistically proven too, right? So there's research done on this for countless years. There's a lot more apathy in youth these days, more social antagonism. Like, these recent research studies are showing this. and I'm witnessing as a teacher, I'm sure you are, when people, I didn't do this or didn't do that, and more they're okay with saying I just don't want to, or I'm not motivated. I would never, like when I first started teaching, the first 10 years of teaching, I never heard of that, never ever. Now I hear it every year, at least one student. I'm not motivated. I just don't, not, I'm thinking,
it's really messed up
which
in
is,
college. I mean, I guess some people do get their post-secondary paid for, so.
But I think it comes down to meaning making and finding meaning in things, right? We were talking about earlier, and how the economic society we live in robs people of the opportunity to find meaning in life and their experiences, because they're told that whatever they do has to be utilitarian in essence, right? So if you're learning if you're that creative process you do in music, you can't just do it for the process. You got to do it to make a living and to sell a product. And then if that's the message, how are you going to find meaning in what you're doing that's bigger than money? And you need that to be motivated.
It's discouraging too how many people kind of use money generated by musicians as like a qualifier for how good their output is, and which is insane. It's like that number of downloads or money coming in or whatever the metric is, it's a measurement of completely different things. And that's not to, I don't want to shit on pop music, because it serves its purpose, and there can be a lot of heart and soul put into it as well. But there's some other stuff that's just like really real self-expression that's kind of actually like super valuable, that just kind of it's being suffocated by the state of the market. And I don't know, I read this one article that said, this time it's not new, just that the boom of the whole record industry of, maybe the 1950s to the end of the 90s was like a blip on the radar. And now music's kind of going back to the local scene, and kind of like the way it's always been. So we do have this network that connects every single person, and there are those gatekeepers in charge of that, but at the same time everyone is also now free to find their favorite like little indie act or whatever. And the main problem with it is that there's no, like, artists have almost no choice. Either creating a record not justifies you, but it legitimizes you kind of as an artist. It says that the stuff you do, because when we improvise or perform, the stuff goes out into the air and it's just gone forever. It was that moment.
Not a permanent product.
Yeah. So we make these things, and they take up time and energy and money, which most of those artists don't even have to begin with. And then they have no like actual value. It's expected to just be given to people. And it's like this, and like for me, I want to make those things, because I want for like these, songs that I come up with to kind of have this life and that ability to reach people that I can't reach physically. I can't, there, my SoundCloud reported that people in Ireland are just like listening to this like weird song I sang on a ukulele out in, I recorded it in Costa Rica, and like just on my laptop, right? But it's on my SoundCloud, and for some reason it just like gets a couple of listens every day in like the UK. And I don't and that's because I made that thing, right? But that, if I wanted to make like the really nice version of that thing, go into a studio, use the good microphones so you can really sense, get like a really accurate reproduction of, me being there and performing. That takes up a lot of effort and resources and stuff, and you don't really get a return from that.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, as I said, as a jazz musician, I'm not necessarily caring about that anyways, because you said it in the word reproduction.
Yeah.
The beauty was you in Costa Rica in the moment with a ukulele. That was the energy moment. That's when it was created. Anything after that is you being a craftsman.
Yeah.
Maybe not 100%, but largely you recrafting a moment of creativity that had already happened. Right? So, like how much growth is going to happen at that point. Maybe you'll be able to reach people, but I think more people, but I think if people are really listening, the ones who really, really listen, they probably prefer the first version.
That's true. That is true. And that's kind of a leg up the visual artists have, because they work on this, their thing gets preserved. Right. You walk into, a room with an original Picasso in it, and you feel the energy coming off that little square of paper, right?
Yeah, I think as I was saying earlier with the thing with 20th century artists, visual artists, there's a aesthetic in 20th century visual art that's also apparent in music these days, and in the last few decades is valuing the unfinished, the things that are ambiguous. So like Rembrandt's sketches now are a big thing in the art world, whereas they were just his working drawings when he was alive. Right? That was stuff nobody saw because they wanted to see his paintings. Right? Picasso was written off as like he's not a real artist, right? Like he would start drawing a fish, a vase. There's a famous video of him drawing a bouquet of flowers that turns into a fish, that turns into a chicken, right? as his mind is just free, right, open in the moment, and so the process was the product, and then afterwards you could sell that as a finished thing. But you weren't there to witness him doing it in real time and see his mind. Oh, I see this thing now, and this. The moment is ephemeral. It's gone. It's not a permanent product. Even though Picasso is sold for millions and millions, the moment it was when it happened, when he painted it. Unlike a lot of artists before the century, where it was the end product. The symphony in music, like. Or the big canvas that gets hung in the Louvre, Eventually it's all product focused. But artists now across many domains are more concerned about capturing that moment of inspiration and leaving it unfinished, because it's almost more interesting because the audience gets to finish. Right? There's Rembrandt's sketches. He doesn't sketch the grass or the light source. He leaves it blank because our minds fill in. Oh, that must be where the light's coming from, because he didn't draw anything in that part of the body. Mm-hmm. Or, same thing in music, right? A Thelonious Monk playing a solo, and then there's like a bar of empty space. And if to a somebody's not listening deeply, it just sounds like he's not playing. But they don't realize that he gave you enough, and you're finishing it in your mind's ear, right? And that's actually that's what you're talking about, reaching an audience. That's like gives the audience space to participate in the creative process, right? It's really engaging. And so I call it the art world when I talk about visual art. I don't know why. But in the visual art world, that's the big thing right now. finding value in the unfinished, the ambiguous, and being open to that and accepting that. And that teaches you something about yourself again, to be okay letting go and not keep picking at the wound, you know, and being okay, or not having to say, I can only reproduce this in the studio and that would be great. Being okay with that, you know, that was a wonderful moment, me and my ukulele in Costa Rica, and just embracing that and leaving that to shine, because it's never going to get better than that moment, no matter what you do. Because even if the reproduction sells 1 million copies, you'll still be talking about the one in Costa Rica.
Yeah.
Right, as an artist, right? And the ones that are really listening to will, you know, it's like when you find those old the bootleg copy of the Rock Band in the rehearsal, practicing whatever the tune is that became huge. It's the one in the rehearsal. You go, isn't that friggin' awesome? Right? Because it's the moment of creation, right?
Everyone's in that flow state. They need to use. They know that they need to be fully present to not mess up this song. That, you know, they have like this very tentative grasp on this thing that's just like slipping through our dimension.
We get a window into the real life of the artist in the moment, and we can, even if we're not artists, we can appreciate the types of things that they might be going through in that moment that get lost once that moment becomes product focused. You know, I think as educators, that's what's missing in education right now, that process focus learning, and as artists, valuing our own process focused process, because we're so pulled by the forces to be product focused. And I think that's my main goal right now. If I have a goal, that's a contradiction again, is to be better at realizing that in my own life and my family's life and my students' life, and helping my friends realize that. And, you know, in the end, I'm just a stupid guitar player. You know, like, you can listen to me and it's probably just just me rambling, you know. That's all it is. You know, and everybody can get there and ramble just as much, and they're going to do it probably way better than I am in their own ways, you know. So, I don't know.
Well, I've enjoyed your rambling. I maybe one or two people also will find some use for this. Is there anything you want to plug, mention?
I want to say thanks. Thanks for talking and asking some cool questions and listening to me ramble. And I don't need to plug anything.
No. All right. Well, where can you have a album of?
I have a couple albums out there, jazz albums.
You have your trio. You toured on that, right? What made you want to do that? Was it just because you were making music with your friends and you're like, let's go on this road trip? We just made this nice thing.
Yeah, like in jazz, like everything else, like it's similar in jazz. If you're playing standards, you can play everywhere, right? Jobbing gigs. But if you're playing original music, you're not going to do a lot of jobbing gigs, you know, weddings, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
where the money is. But so how else can you be allowed to be that creative, writing your own music, and get paid for it while you go on tour? Because if you go on tour, the audience wants to hear original stuff. They don't want to hear you cover Bye Bye Blackbird again, you know, unless you do something special with it, you know. So we got, I think the first tour we went on with that trio, it was, you know, we didn't get a grant for it. We just went on tour. But the second tour we had a government grant for.
Cool.
And then that band was also connected to another quintet band that had two horns, which was Mike Malone and Chris Gale, and which recorded another CD. So the band sort of in different variations. I think we did 3 CDs. It's sort of on hiatus the last couple of years because this whole PhD thing I've been working on, and now I'm writing a book. So yeah, I'd love to get back at it. You know, I love to, because I love jazz, talking about I find in all my experience in music, and which is limited, I don't play Indian music. I wish I could. I've studied Indian music a lot, but not played.
Very cool.
Yeah. So, but jazz gives me the most opportunity to improvise, and now. And the whole conversation here is about improvisation, basically, and the benefits to your well-being. I crave that. It's different playing in a rock band because it's a lot of you're playing the same thing in every song. The solos are improvised. When on the Frank Zappa stuff we play in that band, I improvise all that. But there are some solos that people want to hear.
You can't play a wind-up monkey solo on a Frank Zappa tune, right?
I can't play Alex Lifeson's Limelight solo any other way, or nobody's going to like it.
True.
And it is a friggin' awesome solo, right? But again, it's not really being very creative, right? It's like I'm reproducing it, for the audience sake, and it's fun. It brings me back to my childhood.
I guess there can be a level... It's not exactly creativity, but it's something that feels as good into just like putting all of your attention into making all of those notes sound as crisp and beautiful as possible.
Yeah, there's you think about the typical classical musician these days, they're reproducing. That's all they do, because the whole improvising tradition is sort of gone out of that tradition.
Which is strange because I do think that that's what they were doing when those guys...
Yeah, Bach was an improviser.
Yeah, exactly.
So was Mozart. They were as heavy
I
as
imagine Chopin, at some fancy dinner party, and I can't imagine him just being like, well, that's the end of the song. I'm sure he would kind of jam out.
Sure he would. Yeah, they were all improvisers, but that tradition, again, because of economics, was lost, because when the middle class started to become a middle class... in order to keep that audience coming, the audience was expecting what the previous audience told them to expect. So they thought, well, I can if I change what I did with the last audience, they might not like me and I might not make this money. So it was all about money. So the tradition was lost, the improvising tradition, because they kept just doing the same thing over again, and then they didn't have to improvise, and it wasn't a skill needed to be cultivated. Although a few guys around that are really good at what they do can still improvise. Do you remember Chris Hunt?
Yeah,
he could improvise.
Yeah,
in the tradition and in the Baroque tradition, which is pretty cool that we had somebody on the faculty outside of jazz that could do that.
He's a very special human being.
Yeah,
I'm so grateful that he was the program director while I was
as an employee. I was so grateful too.
I bet.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you
for your time, for your wisdom.
Dun, 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 dun.
Cue end theme now.